Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to BookTube at War. This is a BookTube event that was created this year. It was dreamt up by a viewer, DDB, who enlisted a whole bunch of great BookTubers to talk about military literature, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, science fiction, comics, whatever you want to do, wherever military percolates into what you're feeling like reading. Michael K. Vaughan made it into an event, and I'm one of the co-hosts. And I have been shamefully AWOL, but I am back, and I wanted to share with you some of the BookTube at War reading that I have been doing in the last week. There is now a gap that has opened up between the huge bulk of my reading and the huge bulk of the things that I talk about on this channel, because there were some days where I didn't make videos, but the reading continued. So I've done a lot of reading for BookTube at War, and I wanted to show you one of the books that I read recently, which is this, Battlecruiser by Douglas Reeman. This is from 1997, a novel by an author who also wrote under the pen name of Alexander Kent. When he was writing Douglas Reeman books, they are set in relatively contemporary times, usually World War II. The Alexander Kent novels are the Adventures of Richard Bolitho, who's a hornblower-type character in the Napoleonic seafaring era. And I think probably the I would imagine dwindling reader base of Douglas Reeman these days is split down the middle between people who prefer the Reeman books and people who prefer the Kent books. I don't know. I would imagine that if you like the one, you probably like the one more than you like the other, generally speaking. I like the Richard Bolitho novels, definitely, but the hesitation that you hear in my voice is that they're good, but there are examples right to hand of exactly that kind of writing that's done better, much, much better. You have, for instance, C.L. Forster's Hornblower novels that are much, much better along the same lines, and also Patrick O'Brian, his unbeatable Aubrey and Maturin novels. When you are reading a Bolitho adventure, you're either going to be missing out on reading very similar type stuff that's done much better, or you're going to be pining for that stuff. You're going to be reading a Bolitho adventure and thinking, well, this is reminding me a lot of Lieutenant Hornblower, which I liked a lot more, or Treason's Harbor, which I liked a lot more. For me, anyway, that has always been the reaction when reading those books. Whereas, I don't think anybody did this better than Douglas Reeman, writing adventure novels set in World War II. I don't think anyone has ever done that better. Adventure novels on the open ocean, in the nautical world of World War II, a nautical world that Reeman himself knew very well. He enlisted as soon as he was chronologically able to enlist in anything. And he was wounded a couple of times, seriously, in World War II. So he didn't just, while away. He wasn't just some signal operator on the coast of Finland who had 10-hour shifts and nothing to do except write in notebooks. He saw a lot of the action that he then dramatized. And I confess, I love these things. I have a large number of them as ebooks. This one is on my Kindle Oasis, which has been my reading companion nonstop, practically sutured to my hand for the last week. Just what a wonderful, wonderful device. And for all the dumbest reasons, for all the reasons that I realize are completely shallow, like, for instance, the aluminum. This doesn't clack when you put it down on a table or a nightstand. It has the sound of an iPad hitting that space or a phone hitting that space. Anyway, I don't have all of Douglas Reeman as ebooks. I don't have all of Alexander Kent, I don't think, as ebooks, but I have quite a few of them. And what I've been doing for BookTube events has been sort of spinning a wheel when it comes time to add something to my nightly reading, whether it's, the chatting category romances for my second channel with Sarah the Bookish Knitter, or whether it's BookTube at War, or June on the Range, or Book Trek, or coming up Garb August. Whatever it is, I just add a space. I open up a space on my nightly reading for those things. And boy, oh boy, this wasn't completely random. in that process. When BookTube at War became a thing, when it was, became official, we knew that we had a list of co-hosts. We knew that people would be making videos. And when also Michael K. Vaughan made me the killer of all thumbnails, a thumbnail that I want to use it all the time now, not just for this event. I'm going to beg and plead him to make a thumbnail like that for Garb August for me. But when this whole thing was announced and it was known that there would be a group of booktubers concentrating on military literature for July, I think I remember getting an email from Mark Richardson of Richardson Reads. His channel is shadowed right now, but he might come back someday. You never know. A lot of you have fond memories of Mark's channel. And I think I got an email from him as soon as this whole thing was announced, pretty much rubbing his hands together and saying, yay, an opportunity to reread Douglas Reeman. And I feel the exact same way about this author. It was either Mark or somebody else who sent me that message, said, good, a chance to dive back into Reeman, because his books are so good. They are so good. They are not what you think of, especially if you knew Reeman's personal history, you might think, oh, great. So these are dumb, tech-heavy jargon novels by an old salt trying to relive memories. No, he fills these with drama. And this one is a very dramatic story about battlecruisers, which is a category of warship during World War I and the interval, and then World War II, that were sort of a conceptual middle ground between a full-blown battleship and a cruiser, hence the name, where you wouldn't, the battle cruisers, they were fast. They could do 35 knots, and they were long and sleek. They had a crew of 1,200, really powerful guns, but not all that powerful in terms of armor plating. So they weren't meant to go toe-to-toe with ships of the line. They weren't meant to do that. They were meant to be unreachable by those ships and to be able to fire, to land a huge amount of ordnance on them in a small amount of time from outside of their reach, and certainly from outside of their ability to chase. So they didn't have the seeming impregnability of a battleship. A ship of the line battleship in World War II could take a lot of punishment before it went under. But they were much more powerful. They had much longer range and much greater teeth than a light cruiser. And there were only a few of them. The most famous was the HMS Hood. But in this storyline, there is a battle cruiser called the HMS Reliant, a star of the British Navy, a storied name. And the Reliant's getting a new captain. Guy Sherbrooke is his name. He seems young. He's described in very cinematic terms in this book, where he isn't young, but he looks it. So you can guess, you could practically picture Douglas Reeman mentally casting the actor to play Sherbrooke in the book. Sherbrooke is replacing the old captain who did not die in battle. He was found dead in his car, in his garage. And the Navy is calling it an accident. And his wife, his grieving wife, and his few friends on shore are also calling it an accident. You, the reader, are not supposed to think it was an accident. You're supposed to think there's something psychologically dark going on here. And it is matched in psychological darkness by Sherbrooke's own history. That captain had been a friend of his. And Sherbrooke had recently had his own ship, the Pyrrhus, shot out from underneath him. Over in an instant, which is the way of, if you've ever seen the rare film footage or read first-hand accounts, these battleships of any kind, if they were hit amidships by, for instance, a torpedo or a salvo of torpedoes from German U-boats, despite how tough they were, they could be gone in an instant. It wasn't a question of, getting a 3-hour movie out of the sinking of the Titanic. It was over in minutes. And Sherbrooke is remembering that all throughout this book. He's remembering how 1 minute everything was standard, and the next minute I was clawing for life in freezing cold water, one of only a tiny handful of survivors of the Pierce. The captain. Of, in other words, Sherbrooke is haunted throughout this. One of the early scenes is him going to the funeral of the captain of the Pierce. But he's not out of the service. He's a rare commodity. He's a charismatic, forceful, front combat line captain. So he has to be given another ship, and he is given the Reliant, which is the flagship of a rear admiral. Admiral Stagg is also on board. So you have a weird on-again, off-again command structure, because Guy Sherbrooke, once he's captain of the Reliant, is God on Earth. He's the captain of the ship. But he has a superior on board. And Stagg is not by-the-book type rear admiral. He is, the euphemism that Reeman uses throughout is energetic. He's very energetic, almost uncontrollably so. And has his own opinions about pretty much everything. He's a coarse but charismatic figure. You don't trust him from the beginning. You think this guy's ego and penchant for bombast, neither of which Guy Sherbrooke shares, could get him and his ship into trouble. A lot of trouble. And he has the ability to do that. He might not routinely countermand the captain on his own vessel. I don't actually know what the rules were, if there were any rules, or if they were honored in the breach. If you're a captain of a frontline battlecruiser and you have an admiral on board, stationed on board, he's put his flag on your ship, then what can you and can you not do? Is he in command in combat? Well, it turns out you're going to learn a lot about that in this book, and it's not all that's going to be pretty, because the ship that sunk the Pierce is still out there. The German ship is still out there, and not only that, but there are hunting packs of U-boats that can appear out of nowhere. That you're not ever 100% sure. This takes place in the mid-40s, so the war is well underway. This is not the same kind of scenario as, for instance, in Nicholas Montserrat's book, The Cruel Sea, where we watch the British Navy figuring out a way to deal with U-boats. They don't have any way to deal with them. Building some sort of escort system for convoys, which are all important. By the time Battlecruiser takes place, rough sonar, rough radar exists. It's not always reliable. It blinks out a couple of key points in this book, but it at least allows you to have some forewarning if there are U-boats in the area. Also, there's all sorts of intelligence networks, even in occupied countries on the mainland of Europe, that are trying their hardest to get information out about especially where the big German battleships are and where they're moving, where they might end up being. So there's every chance that Guy Sherbrooke will see combat. I mean, this novel isn't 40 pages old before he sees combat. And that, well, that shows you the two mistakes at the heart of this book. And neither one of them is Douglas Reeman. Douglas Reeman is not making any mistakes in this book. This is so good. The dark secret that Sherbrooke is hiding about the Pierce dovetails beautifully with the dark secret of the Reliant under its previous captain. The way those things are very slowly, very purposely, and very intelligently dripped out for you, the reader, are so well done. They are so well done. There is a human story that takes place in the course of this book, very much so, while you are getting all of the standard naval battle stuff that you're going to want if you're reading naval fiction. But there are two mistakes at the heart of this novel. They aren't Reeman. He doesn't do anything wrong in this book. Instead, they are mistakes built into the plot. Mistake number one is the British Navy's insistence that battlecruisers are viable vessels of war, when over and over again, from World War I on, over and over again, that proves not to be true. In order to achieve their agility, their speed, they have to sacrifice armor plating. And that means they're extremely vulnerable. One hit can take them out. And there are examples all throughout. There are two famous examples from actual naval history that Guy Sherbrooke knows perfectly well. He knows every detail about, for instance, the Hood and the fate that it has. He knows the vulnerability of his own ship and all of those people, all of those lives, 1,200 lives in his hands. That's mistake number one, is the what we can see now with hindsight. I mean, you don't have much choice, right, when you're in a world war. But we can see with hindsight the misuse of these things. How romantic they are as an idea. How quixotic they are as an idea of a battleship. That's mistake number one. And mistake number two that we can see, again, with hindsight, and again, there wouldn't be much that you could do about it in 1943. But mistake number two would be putting Guy Sherbrooke back in battle when he clearly suffers from what we would now call PTSD, which is not just, despite what some hardasses might say, that is not a ticket for malingering, nor is it a minor thing about someone having a bad afternoon. If you're a captain of a battlecruiser and you have PTSD, you could kill all of your men. You could get your whole crew killed. If you freeze in a situation that is bringing out the trauma, as the great line on The West Wing that described PTSD, is that PTSD is the inability to remember something without reliving it. Well, Guy Sherbrooke doesn't have that ability. He has no distance between the events that he's going through now in this book and the events that have traumatized him. So when he's on the high seas and he gets word that one of the major British battleships has put to sea and maybe out there, the sound of battle klaxons, the sight of crew members running for their guns, running for their stations, the sound of the message pipes from one deck to the next, the movement of the guns, the huge gun turrets that this thing has as they get into position. Any one of those things could freeze a captain who is traumatized by a previous event like that. It wouldn't have anything to do with Guy Sherbrooke's soundness for command, but there's nothing you can do about it. The study of it, the understanding of it, the sympathy for it was less developed in the 1940s. And also, again, what can you do? You don't exactly have a deep bench of seasoned war captains in the British Navy. But those are undeniable, and you as a reader are going to see that. Reeman does a really good job of evoking that, so that by the time you're a third of the way through this book, when you know that the Reliant has a lot more action to see and may not survive, you are now worried on two fronts about the Reliant's command. The crew is as sound as could be, and there is a young, handsome non-com who comes on board, and he's a dashing pilot, and you can also picture Reeman mentally casting him as well. But when it comes down to brass tacks, you as a reader are wondering, well, I don't know that I trust either of the commanders of this vessel. I certainly don't trust Rear Admiral Stagg. He is going to talk himself into a fatal spot. But I'm not sure that I trust Guy Sherbrooke either. I don't think you get halfway through the book and you think, okay, well, I like him, and I trust his intellect. I trust his seasoned ability, his experience, but I don't know that he's not going to go to pieces, and also I don't know what he's hiding. He's hiding something. The narrative is not telling us everything. It's doling out little pieces here and there. I loved it. Absolutely loved the experience. Every time I read, just a few months ago, I found a hardcover of The Iron Pirate by Douglas Reeman, which is not a Reeman I think I have as an ebook. I found it at the Brattle Bookshop, reread it, and every time I do that, whether it's an ebook or a print book, paperback of some kind, I'm always reminded of how much I love these books. I could easily make a whole BookTube at War out of just this author. He wrote like 70 books and sold millions and millions of copies of them. He was very successful, even though he's largely not remembered today. And I think the Alexander Kent novels are probably better remembered than the books he wrote under his own name. But whoever it was, whether it was Mark Richardson or somebody else, whoever it was who rubbed their hands together and said, ooh, chance to reread Reeman, I definitely felt that when I reread Battlecruiser. I could not only could I easily reread this again, right now. But I could also just easily read this author for the rest of the month. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I might read one other Douglas Reeman, but it'll be later in the month. But that is my my book for today, and my reading device for today, my Kindle Oasis. I've been absolutely inseparable from this thing, just inseparable. And if you were to ask me why, I know this is not a tech video, why this is instead of the Kindle Paperwhite or the Kindle Basic, my navy blue Kindle Basic, I don't know. I don't quite know. I love the durability of this thing. The form factor, I think, is the reason. But anyway, that's my field report for today. It's Battlecruiser by Douglas Reeman, a later novel of his, but boy, oh boy, did I love it. Oh, man. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.